So what I thought we would do is, I know everyone here is a avid Wiki contributor, and just to show that, I want everyone here who contributes to Wikis to raise your hand and say, I'm a Wiki contributor. Whoa!
I'm a Wiki contributor.
Holy cow! I was actually thinking none of you would raise your hand, but I forgot we are Geekville.
Ask how many are virgins.
How many of you married the first person you started dating? All right. So what I thought we would do, actually, we have an awesome panel because each person up here has worked in different aspects of Wiki's user-generated content. And what I thought we would do is first start by having each person talk a little bit about the background of how they got involved. And maybe actually, Jack, you could start us out and tell us a little bit about, really briefly, maybe even touching a little bit on the eHow experiences and then WikiHow, and then we'll kind of go down the line. So, Jack, if you could kick us off.
Sure. I started in entrepreneurship 10 years ago. I've done 4 startups now. And after I did my first startup, I said, wow, I can't believe people will pay me to do this. I'm never getting a real job again. And 3 startups later, I bought a company called eHow out of financial stress. This is one of the companies I got going during the first boom, went bust during the first bust, and needed some. It was basically about to be flushed down the toilet, and I bought it for in kind of the last gasping moments for the company, and brought it back to life while I was working at another startup, and took it from 40,000 unique visitors up to 5.5 million uniques. Just kind of doing things to basically not doing anything stupid, just trying to let a little SEO into the juice, let a little SEO happen. And while I was working on eHow, I realized I should back up a bit here. eHow is the largest how-to manual on the web still. It's all written professionally generated, or mostly professionally generated. And as I was doing it, I became a little dismayed with how professionally generated content worked. As I looked at it, eHow was good, certainly got a lot of search traffic, got a lot of users, but the content was just kind of okay. It was just kind of okay. We had a lot of content, but nothing was really amazing. And then I finally found Wikipedia in 2004, and I said, wow, this content is not just okay, this content is amazing. I wonder if something like this could happen in how-to. So in 2005, I launched WikiHow. It was originally part of eHow. And the first year, it was really embarrassing. The content was terrible. There was barely any users. No one was really reading it. But I could see that it was going up and to the right. The ball was rolling the way I wanted to roll. And the next year, the content was getting better. More users were coming. And I realized at that point that this was going to work. And so I ended up selling eHow to a company called Demand Media, and they continued to run it, and they're still doing great. And WikiHow's done great too. We're up to 17 million unique visitors. We're one of the largest sites on the net. It's run by me and 5 other employees. And I really think it will be the world's default how-to manual. If you'd like to be the part of your brain, outsource your brain to WikiHow whenever you're thinking how-to. And it's been a ton of fun.
Awesome. Gil, tell us how you got involved with Wikia.
Oh boy. So I was at eBay for a long time, and in many ways eBay was one of the early community content sites, except it was a community content site around people wanting to get rid of shit that nobody really should ever buy. When I first joined, Beanie Babies were the largest thing we sold, and women's underwear was the second largest. Very strange place.
How big were the women?
Apparently that wasn't the issue.
But Dave did stop buying that over time. So.
And in my spare time, I became an investor and got involved in a lot of startups just because I really loved the scrum of sort of the early days. eBay had grown when I joined from about 80 people to 15,000 when I left, and so getting involved in startups was sort of my way of not only giving back, but more just sort of getting back to the fun part of it. As Jack mentioned, he didn't have to be a corporate drone anymore, and I did for a while. So this is sort of my way of trying to get back at the man. And one of the companies I invested in was Wikia, and a friend of mine called me up and he says, Jimmy Wales invented this Wikipedia thing, and it's really pretty big, and this was probably 2005. And he wants to start this other thing. And I said, okay, great, send me the business plan. He says, we don't have one. I said, okay, send me the one-page, summary. He goes, no, we don't have that either. I said, okay, what's the company going to raise money at? What's the pre-money at? And he goes, I don't know, but it keeps going up. And I said, okay, and sent him a blank check and said, I'll take as much as I can get. 3 months later, I finally get to meet Jimmy, and he starts talking about this notion of giving everyone in the world a pen. And how Wikipedia has sort of given people a place where they can contribute on every topic, but that the folks at Wikipedia have done this amazing thing, right? They've built an encyclopedia, and yet as you go to every town in America, there are libraries. And libraries are filled with more than encyclopedias. People actually read other things, right? They read how-to guides, and they read information about processes at work that they want to be a part of, and they read about recipes and World of Warcraft and lots of other things. And so Jimmy was sitting at dinner with me talking about sort of, as he waxes philosophical about, getting the entire world's information in every language in one place. And I said, well, that's not a small idea. And it sounds kind of neat. So that's how I ended up where I am.
All right, David.
I was working as an engineer for a company called There.com doing virtual worlds. And I heard about this thing called Wiki, and this was probably 2002. So I downloaded a copy of PHP Wiki and put it on a spare development server and started just putting all my own documentation on there. And I was very annoyed that other people in the company didn't immediately start using it, but it was sort of became David's little documentation area for a bit. And after a couple months, eventually I cajoled another group to starting to use it themselves, and then another group used it, and by the time I was thinking about leaving the company to discover the wild world of business by starting one, pretty much everybody in the company was using it continuously as the main place where you could find out information about what was going on at the company. So it's like, wow, this is pretty transformative. I was working through a bunch of other business ideas, and on the side, I was helping a number of nonprofit organizations I was involved in, and the group house I was living in. Like these were different organizations that could have benefited from a private wiki. So I went and set one up. It was sort of a pain in the ass to go and set up a private hosted wiki on some server I happen to have in the cloud. I was like, you know what? I'm getting tired of doing this for these organizations. They should be able to set themselves up, and it should be as easy as, I don't know, making a peanut butter sandwich. So that's where PBWorks came from. And at the time, we were the only set it up in 30-second private wiki solution. And I don't know, some of you may have seen the lean startup talk I gave, but the company's been through quite a few pivots now, and now we are an enterprise SaaS company.
Cool. Awesome. So one of the reasons I thought this group in particular would find wikis interesting is the scale you can get to based on your cost structure, right? And I think it might be really interesting to share. A couple of you touched a little bit on it, but give us a sense of how much traffic you're at, and sort of in general, for most of your life, how many people you had, or how much, when you sort of think about explaining to folks, because when you think about how starting a company is hard because you have to raise all this money and you have to do all this stuff, and maybe explain a little bit about how wikis are so much more cost efficient than a lot of other businesses that you can think about starting. Maybe anyone can kind of jump in and give us just a sense of what we're talking about here.
Jack's probably got the best story on this one.
Well, so WikiHow, I funded myself, and actually kind of interesting story. I've done 4 startups. They've been successful inversely proportional to the amount of money invested in them. Which I think is kind of a note of interest for all entrepreneurs. The VCs don't like that line, though. Yes, wikis are very capital efficient businesses. It gives you a lot of degrees of freedom. For us, going back to our stats, we have 17 million uniques. That puts us in somewhere in the top 150 of the websites in the US. And we do that with 6 employees. We have not spent any time worrying about monetization. We just put Google ads. We're doing the bare minimum. We don't have any direct sales force. We don't have image ads. There's a lot of things we haven't done. A lot of things we haven't had to do because the business is capital efficient. which has been great. It's allowed us to really focus on the community, focus on the product, focus on the mission of building a how-to manual.
That's good. We're not quite as capital efficient. Although when I joined, we were spending about $100,000 a month for everything we did, and at that point we were already fairly large, a couple million uniques. Now we're about 24, 25 million uniques. Spending hasn't gone up much. And to Jack's point, these crazy people at Amazon called us up and said they wanted to invest $20 million. And we're spending $100,000 a month. And I have this conversation with what is now my board members saying, dude, if I take that kind of money, not only am I going to have to buy Aeron chairs, but everybody's going to want a helicopter to get to work. But I don't know that wikis are the only capital efficient market or startup. I mean, Dave McClure and I were talking earlier today about there are a lot of businesses you can start in your backyard, in your basement with one server that they're not about, hockey stick, YouTube style growth. And I think none of us here have had that sort of growth. They're about consistent plugging away with double-digit or triple-digit growth every year. And the guy who's really the poster child for this is Craig Newmark at Craigslist. And he has this aw shucks attitude where he says, 5 years later, I'm an overnight success. And for those of you who have heard it, it's actually true. The first 5 years in a very capital efficient business like this, even your mother's embarrassed to talk about what you do. And then all of a sudden you're big, and everybody goes, dude, I could have done that. Like, it wasn't that hard. So, for those of you plugging away, the one thing I'd say is 5 years later you will be an overnight success. You just have to have the, the stamina and the patience and be really, really frugal.
The first 3 years of my company, I had no salary, and the first 2.5 years, I was the only employee of the company. And in that 2.5 year period, the global headquarters was my bedroom, so I had a 6-second commute. Although on hot summer days, it was the second story of a 2-story house with no air conditioning. I needed to jump into the pool just to be able to think, and I said, damn it, I think we're eventually going to need an office just for the air conditioning so I can think. We got to 100,000 communities and several million pages of private content, probably about 10% of the Fortune 500 using PBWiki before we took our first dollar of institutional investment. So, I mean, like Gil said, I don't think that there's anything necessarily magical about Wiki that makes the business capital efficient, but that it is a knowledge business that can be scaled efficiently on servers that get ever faster and cheaper and more efficient by Moore's Law. Does make it a remarkably low capital business. When I've talked to people about like, hey, what % of your revenue do you have to spend on operational expenses? Like it's about 1.5%. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, one more thought just coming out of that. Because I'm often jealous of, the Skypes and the YouTubes and these amazing hockey stick run curves. But one of the things, in particular, for those of you who are VCs who really should find a way to give Jack money, is if you look at Wikipedia and you look at Wikia and you look at WikiHow, they've had really, really boring, consistent 300% a year growth. YouTube, by contrast, had 50,000% year-over-year growth. But if you look at Wikipedia, it grew 3x for 8 years in a row. It never slowed down. And so one of the neat things about wikis is there's this sort of network effect cycle of content begets audience, begets content, begets audience, and it just keeps working. Which I think is kind of, the unusual thing about what we do that is not necessarily true in blogs or other UGC.
Actually, let's flip to the other side then. If the 100 people here tried to start a wiki today, and it's 6 months later, how many of them do you think would still have anyone contributing to that wiki? Would be your, like, just sort of playing the statistics. Out of 100 people, 6 months from now, how many will have anyone still contributing? Assuming, the standard success rate for trying to get a community going.
15?
15, yeah.
Well, looking at the crowd here, I'd say 2. because you all have really interesting jobs and things that keep you busy.
Okay.
I'm one wiki guy.
One wiki, yeah.
I wouldn't know. I've just done one wiki.
One for one.
One for one. But,
okay.
but I think it's very hard. I mean, you look around wikis. There's one of the things that surprised me about wikis in general is when I started WikiHow, I was like, well, this wiki thing is going to be huge, but I really want to make sure the how-to wiki thing works. I'm just going to focus all my energy on that. And I thought by now we'd see wikis in all these categories. In every single category, we have a really great wiki. And it's surprising me that that's actually in 2009. That's still not the case.
Yeah. So let's say that folks here said, okay, I want to start a wiki. I can use either off-the-shelf technology, or I can pay for something and build it. But now they want to get it moving. They want to get it going, and now they have to find contributors. So where are they going to get their contributors from? Is it typically that they already have a passion area and they are the contributor and they know other people in that area? I mean, it seems like there are super users in this model, people who are extremely aggressive contributors who keep this thing going. And if they're out there saying, oh, I'm into automotive and I want to start the ultimate automotive wiki, how are they going to do that? I mean, you've all seen it or actually made it happen or facilitated it. So what would they do to actually get that going?
So we have coming up on 1 million separate wiki communities that are hosted on our service. And it's something that we've seen that's pretty uniform across the successful ones is that there is somebody who's there at an organization who completely believes in the vision of Wiki and the importance of transforming their workplace or organization with that. And it's a long slog. I mean, I think people who expect that they can just kind of drop a wiki into an organization and magically everybody collaborates better, they get bitterly disappointed. Because they put this thing out there and they put a bunch of work into it for 2 days and it's like, hey, well, why aren't people using it? And then those people give up. So one of the first things that we do is we try to coach people on, hey, it's going to take a couple months of you going and putting a lot of interesting content on here, of you rallying people. When people email out questions to the whole company saying, do you know about this? You say, check the damn wiki. It's a lot of cultural change like that you need to make a successful wiki.
Other thoughts? I mean, Jack, how did you get your first contributors?
Well, people always ask me this question, and I never have the magic answer. People always get very disappointed. So we didn't hire people to do this. We didn't seed content. We didn't go spam all the blogs and forums around saying, hey, go contribute to this wiki. I think we kind of got lucky. So what did we do right? So, and I think if you look at all wikis that work, I should say in our space, the sort of the public wiki space, all the wikis that work have one thing in common, and they have a noble mission. They have something that motivates a certain set of people. In WikiHow's case, it's contributing to a collaborative how-to manual. In Wikipedia's case, it's the open encyclopedia. Wikia's case, every community has their own reason why people are there. The Star Wars wiki people are extremely motivated about sharing their Star Wars knowledge. And it's going to be different for each community. But the wikis that work all have this one unifying thing that brings people together. And a small group of people it will appeal to, but that brings those people in.
Anything else? Okay. So the next question I have to ask is, what do you think is, I guess, the main factor for success going forward when you look at this world of content and the verticals out there? What's going to happen basically in the next 5 or 10 years when you think about, are all the wikis going to come together? Are there going to be a lot more wikis? What happens in the next 10 years? Is it that we just need to make some changes to the wiki technology and all of a sudden people who weren't using it before are using it? I mean, you've made a lot of modifications to what a wiki is with your software, and you're seeing it in some of the media wiki and other properties out there. What is it going to change? Like, we looked out there and we saw who was contributing to wikis, and we kind of had this laughter about who does it. What's going to change in the future that now, is it going to be different in the future, or is it going to be the same for the next 5 or 10 years?
I think one of the things that's interesting about wiki technology is that we've been simultaneously behind the rest of the web in terms of technology, and we've also been simultaneously ahead of the rest of the web. If you look at wikis for the most part, UI sucks, The technology sucks, it's hard to use, it's well behind in several obvious fronts. But from a social software perspective, the human interactions, the quality of the interactions that people participating on a wiki get are extremely high. It's very meaningful, it's very engaging, it's different than you get on the rest of the web. And to some extent, I think what wikis need to do is catch up on the things that they're behind. And Gil has done a great job of this on Wikia. If you check out this, compared to other media wikis out there, the Gil's stuff is by far the best. Wikis need to catch up on those areas that are behind and yet still maintain the strength of the really meaningful human collaboration that is very hard to get elsewhere on the web right now.